name is Steve Aschburner. He's written a book called Harmon Killebrew, Ultimate Slugger. He's also a writer for NBA.com. He joins us from up in Minnesota today. And Steve, good to talk to you. How are you tonight?
I'm good, gentlemen. How are you?
We're doing great.
Well,
good to have you.
We can't be any better than we are, and let's get right to it. I know you got a busy schedule for your book tour, and tell us a little bit about how early you got started with Harmon Killebrew and what was the driving force to put the book together.
Yeah, it's, like a lot of people who didn't grow up in Minnesota and grew up during Killebrew's career. This is pre-cable, pre-satellite, one national game of the week, and Minnesota wasn't always on it. I didn't have much of a conception of Killebrew. I'd see the numbers he would post in the box scores and heard the name, and I just envisioned this, Paul Bunyan-esque character from up in the upper Midwest, and, found out later that this guy was 5'11" tall. He was about 225 pounds when he played. Here I was thinking, somebody that hit 40-plus home runs every year. He was a 6'5", 260-pound slugger, and no, different physical specimen than I anticipated. But there was no denying the power numbers that Harmon Killebrew put together. So now, fast forward, I grow up as a baseball fan in Chicago. I go to journalism, get into newspapering, cover various sports. Get into the Twin Cities as a working journalist, and part of my duties are to go out and do some stories at the Metrodome with the Minnesota Twins in the mid to late '80s. Well, Harmon Killebrew was a color analyst, and I got to meet him and know him a little bit then. The Twins won the '87 World Series. I know that meant a lot to him. And then, I'd see Harmon occasionally, now and then at the ballpark. I actually saw him in the Phoenix airport a couple times. He had lived down there in retirement. And then, of course, the unfortunate news, was it December of 2010 when Harmon, let the Twins fans and his fans know that he was fighting esophageal cancer. And, a very deadly form of cancer, very difficult to treat or recover from. And by May of 2011, Harmon had passed away. Well, a great outpouring of emotion and love for him in the Twin Cities as a ball player and as a man. And soon enough, I get a phone call from a publisher in Chicago. I was already living in Chicago by then, who they want to do a book on Harmon. Do you know anybody who could write it? I said, well, my day job is with NBA.com. I might be headed for a long lockout. It might not be too much work for me there, so I could do it. And they were fine with that. I had written a book for them about 4 years earlier, and so I decided to take on the project. And much of it was, while I would have loved to have done an as told to book with Harmon, sitting down and picking his brain and just running a tape recorder while he told his stories, that wasn't possible. So now I had to take on the challenge of doing right by him with a project based on interviews and research. Talking to old teammates, friends, rivals, and going back through the archives and putting the thing together that way. And I'll tell you, it was a great deal of fun for me to. I was almost able to relive baseball in the '60s and the '70s by working on this.
Doug?
Yeah, Steve, I had a chance to read through it. Really enjoyed the book, and like you, did not see Harmon that much on television. Kind of started watching baseball toward the end of his career, a little bit with the Twins, and then I guess his final year with the Kansas City Royals, and knew a little bit more as a broadcaster when I heard him occasionally on TV. But really an unsung, a small market in Minneapolis. I guess the '65 World Series was probably the first time that maybe the country had a chance to see him play, right, other than the game of the week occasionally.
Yeah, that's right. And, he was determined to get back in time to play in that series, obviously for competitive reasons. And he had gotten hurt prior to that and had his elbow thrown way out of whack with a collision at first base. And he was able to get himself back in time to play in that series. They did not win the series. The Dodgers beat them in 7 games. Minnesota went up 2-0 before that series switched over to Los Angeles. And that's when Sandy Koufax decided he was going to, be his incredible self, and he really took it to the Twins a couple of times in that series. So Yeah, it was a great opportunity for him. You never get the sense that Harmon sort of bemoaned or agonized over not winning that one. He had made it to the series, probably thought that they would get back. They didn't, but he had a home run off Don Drysdale, and he always gave full credit to the Dodgers, and particularly Koufax.
Steve, maybe a little bit of a break in the early part of his career. I know Mickey Mantle hit the longest home run at Griffith Stadium that was ever measured, but I think for Harmon to move out of Griffith Stadium and into the Minneapolis-St. Paul area was a little bit of a boost for him.
Yeah, friendlier confines by far as a ballpark in which a power hitter like Harmon could thrive.
Right.
Griffith Stadium was, very distant fences. The Griffith family, when they had teams that weren't that successful with power hitting, they'd have those fences extended back. And Minnesota, whether it was just the air here in the summertime, the configuration of the ballpark, and the way the park measured down the left field line, particularly because Harmon was a pure pull hitter, it just suited him just great. I mean, I'm not saying he had any goofy, short porch, unfair advantage, but it was much more conducive to his game.
No, they didn't put a Greenberg Garden in out there, but at the same time, as you said, it was much more conducive. And the one thing about D.C. was that ballpark was just wide open. It was very, very tough to hit home runs in Griffith Stadium.
Yeah, and if you look at his career breakdown, he was pretty much a half and half. He hit about half his home runs on the road, so it wasn't as if he just fattened up on the ballpark in Minnesota. But he was an equal opportunity offender when it came to pitchers around the American League.
Well, I got this sense, Steve, from reading the book, and you really go into it well with kind of getting into the personality of Harmon Killebrew, relatively kind of a quiet guy, very gentle guy, not really a big ego as far as you expect today from the Sluggers. So that came across, at least from the way I read the book. Is that what the impression you got from knowing him in person a little bit?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, he had some views that came out as particularly later in life, and could get his dander up on some things. But he played during a time when everybody thought it was proper that a professional athlete would be a role model and be someone that kids would look up to, and he took that seriously. And now maybe that's not so sexy. It doesn't have the sizzle, and it's almost as if people have to apologize for being a little bland if they don't have controversies and squabbles in their career to generate headlines. But it was a way he wanted to do it. It worked well for him, being a fun kid from Idaho and pretty grassroots kind of a guy. I mean, it would have made, let's put it this way, it would have made my job as a biographer easier if he'd had a career and life filled with controversies that could provide extra chapters that write themselves. But he really did not, certainly not during his playing days. Pretty straightforward. Challenges, yes. Injuries, more than his share. And, the same fears and anxieties and irritants that most people have. But, he tried to navigate it as a sportsman, and he did a good job. And I think that's part of the appeal of the book is that it is like stepping into a time machine a little bit, because you look at what generates the headlines now with contract disputes and guys that want to play here and not play there, and it's refreshing to me to. I know the players didn't get compensated quite as well. They wouldn't want to change places, but it was a simpler time.
Well, I got one more question before we do. Just want to talk to you about Howard for 1 second down there in Orlando. But fortunately, he went over the 500 plateau with home runs, which made it, at that particular time, was almost an automatic to go into the Hall of Fame, whereas, for instance, a number of players right now are close to 500. Tampa Bay had one that just retired. It was close to 500. 500 is not necessarily, Fred McGriff. 500 is not necessarily an automatic anymore.
That's right. No, that's right. And yet, you know what? 500 wasn't an automatic for Harmon, too. He had to wait 4 years to go into the Hall of Fame. And hardly anybody had done it at that point. But, I went out to Cooperstown as part of the research for this project and went through some old clippings. and found, a number of, particularly East Coast sports writers who they looked at his career achievements and said, well, he really only did one thing well. Well, yeah, he did it better than all but about 5 guys who played the game at that point. They'd say, well, his batting average, that's not that impressive, and he struck out a heck of a lot, Well, yeah, it came with the territory, and he accepted the trade-off, because if he struck out 2 or 3 times but hit a 3-run homer, that might win a game. So Harmon was happy to be an all-or-nothing kind of a player, and it should not have taken him 4 years to make the Hall of Fame. I think when he did make it, he particularly appreciated it. If that added to his appreciation, then maybe it was worth it. But he was a great ambassador for that Cooperstown Shrine, and he's missed. He'll be missed out there again this year, just like he was last year with his passing.
Well, Doug, Steve's got to go, but you and I chatted, and I don't know if we discussed this with Steve before we went on the air, but the Howard situation is very much in the news today, and you have a great affiliation with the NBA in terms of writing.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, Dwight Howard has been saying today that he wants to play for the New Jersey Nets, and that any other trade to any other franchise, he would not sign long-term with them. It would become a rent-a-player sort of a situation. And I say, I wonder what Dwight's going to say tomorrow, because it seems to change day by day, sometimes hour by hour. I think Dwight Howard has done himself a great disservice with the way he's handled this, really the whole last, since the start of last season, and the whole free agency thing. You'd think that the guys would go to school on what LeBron did and what Carmelo Anthony did in holding their teams, hostage or at least offending the fan base with LeBron. And Dwight Howard has been worse than either of those guys, in my opinion. He has botched this thing, and he continues to botch it. He's digging himself a serious PR hole. I think the teams right now would be grateful not to have Dwight Howard. I never thought I would say anything like that, but he's become a true diva, and so much about what's going on in his head and off the court, and so little, relatively, about what he does on the court anymore. I think Orlando will be best off moving him as soon as it can and just cutting the ties.
And also the fact that he's ruling out where most of the money is. I mean, he said he will not play in Los Angeles. Houston is willing to spend a tremendous amount of money to bring him in there. Of course, Jay-Z is really spearheading, the Brooklyn Nets. But, I mean, you don't ever rule out Los Angeles when you're trying to negotiate a new contract.
Well, he'll get maximum money. He'll get the same amount of money wherever he ends up. It's just a matter of whether the extra income, the opportunities away from the court. I mean, you'd say Los Angeles should provide, a tremendous marketing platform, but you know what? So should the new trendy New York team. I think that that they're not as good. They haven't, historically been a winner at all. Quite the contrary. But if Dwight is more about, huge underwear ads with him and them looming in Times Square, well, then Brooklyn is a fine place for him to go. Winning NBA games doesn't seem to be tops on his list of priorities, so he's probably going to get what he's aiming for.
Doug?
Well, Steve, I know you're on a book tour. We appreciate you taking a few minutes. Again, the name of the book is called Harmon Killebrew, Ultimate Slugger. Been talking with Steve Aschburner today of right for NBA.com. And Steve, you have a website people can get a hold of the book if they like?
I do not, but they tell me that the book is available, your traditional online opportunities, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, you do a search in any of your favorite search engine for Harmon Killebrew and a book, and it'll probably pop up. There hasn't been written about him since about 1971 that's long out of print. So it's easy enough to find. It's available in e-reader versions as well. So frankly, guys, I don't think there's any excuse for not buying it.
Well, it's published by Triumph Books. You can go to their website, too. But, Steve, enjoy the rest of your book tour out there, and hopefully we'll have you back on later, if not this summer, before the next NBA season, talk a little basketball.
That's the deal. Thanks for the generous use of your time, and you guys have a great summer, too.
You too.
Sure.
Best
Thanks,
of luck.
Steve.